well done. Next is Celia, and Celia's been researching her family history, and she's found out a few things. The fact is sometimes stranger than fiction. Celia.
Right, I'd like to tell you a true story of my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Dorlinda Carlton. We look for influences for our drama, but I've actually got a real story here that was part of my own family, which is great. I have no image of Dorlinda, but I do have a surprising of factual information, slowly gathered over the years. In size, I imagine she must have been small, as were my mother, grandfather and his brother before me. I'm not of that build. I've inherited my height from my father's side. My mother had rather a sharp, hooked nose. I've not inherited that either. Mum always says she had a classic Roman nose. Would Dorlinda have had the same? She was originally from a wealthy family. I doubt if she was strong in health. Throughout the generations, her family had more than their fair share of inherited ailments. Right, let's start at the beginning. Dorlinda was born in 1817, on September the 15th, 130 years to the day before I was born. For a long time I was confused by her date of birth. It kept varying. Perhaps her memory of record keeping wasn't so good, as her age when she died was reduced a bit. Could that have been vanity, even in that time? Recently I found her baptism in Lisburn Cathedral to a wealthy and influential father, John Carlton. She was christened Dorlinda. Now, it may be that she was born out of wedlock, as in John's will, she is named as Dorlinda Carlton, alias Sullivan, along with her brother William. There are several other children born to John who were mentioned in the will, but they all had different aliases. And it looks as if this John only married his fourth partner, and they had no children from the marriage. Again, harking back to the will, the bulk of John's money and possessions were bequeathed to his wife's niece, who wasn't a blood relative at all. So we missed out on that one. Dorlinda was under 8 years old when John died, and £25 a year was left to her and her brother for their education. Now you've got to remember this is 1830-ish. £25 was probably quite a reasonable amount. So I next found Dorlinda at a school in Derbyshire, in Ockbrook, and this was part of a Moravian religious community, and it was famous for its school. And in the records there are letters from Coot Hill in Ireland asking if places could be found for these two poor orphans. Dorlinda and William were accepted at Ockbrook community and put to their studies. William doesn't appear to have been too academic, and from reading the Moravian school diaries, didn't put any effort in, so much so that the Moravian community sent him home to Ireland within the year. The diary reads that William, on reduced terms, did not seem likely to prosecute his studies with much success. Dorlinda was left on her own, aged only 9 years old, in a country foreign to her. When Dorlinda was 19 years old, something else happened that evidently caused concern. The Elders' Conference minutes say, in 1836, it appears expedient that Sister Carlton, now an assistant teacher in Our Lady's boarding school, should have a change. Had she fallen in love? She was hastily shipped off to another Moravian community in Fulneck, now part of Pudsey in West Yorkshire. Again, there are no records for her for a year or two until Thomas Hyland, a journeyman baker, is mentioned as wanting to marry her. The elders of the church did not approve of her suitor, and there were various entries in the diaries saying as much and forbidding this liaison. Of age now, Dorlinda and Thomas ignored these instructions and were married at Calvary Church, a good distance away from Fulneck, on the 2nd of January 1939. Now you've got to imagine this was all before the railway had come, and their only form of transport was along very muddy roads, long distances. So they had to walk, or they went by carriage to the church, past Pudsey's manufacturing mills, and then through the beautiful rolling hills of this area. And I was there last week, and it is gorgeous. A son, Peter, was born later that year. Were they disenfranchised from the Moravian Church for disobeying the elders? In the 1841 census, they're back in the Full Neck community, with Thomas now running the family's bakery. However, their bliss was not to last. Thomas died the year later, in 1842. What was Dorlinda to do? Alone in the world now, how could she support her son? She appears to have been reasonably independent as she starts to buy and sell a substantial amount of property and works in the community as a schoolmistress. 4 years later, not too long a widow, she remarries, this time to my great-grandfather, Jeremiah Grimshaw, a cloth manufacturer. They live in a beautiful house called Cote that survived to this day, just on the outskirts of Full Neck village in Pudsey. They have 2 more children, my great-grandfather Carlton Grimshaw and his younger sister Angelina. Sadly, Dorlinda, aged only 39, dies in childbirth. Her funeral and burial at Full Neck is attended by many from the Moravian community, and she's buried under a simple stone in the Full Neck cemetery. Jeremiah was either devastated by the loss of Dorlinda's bequests, or the loss of Dorlinda's bequests were inconsequential to him. And although he was executor to her will, it was not proved until his death 19 years later. And Dorlinda's son Carlton doesn't seem to have the same business acumen as his mother, as before long he was borrowing substantial amounts of money left, right and centre. He had his own set of tragedies. Of his 6 children, only 2 survived infancy, the eldest being my grandfather, Reginald Carlton Grimshaw. So was this an inherited weakness? I never knew my grandfather, but my mother talked of a mild, gentle and loving man. From the photos I have of him, he looks a real charmer. What I'd give to meet my ancestors. It's great going through the records and finding snippets of information. It's like a detective story. It helps me to understand where I come from. However, I can only guess at my ancestors' appearance and character. Everything I learn about these attributes is from hearsay. When relatives die, they take a rich source of information with them, the stuff you can't get in books. The lost information is my inheritance. It's an integral part of me. I think the family had determination to overcome their weaknesses, their trials and tribulations, and it's from this that I get my strength from. Perhaps one day, in 150 years' time, someone will remember me in this way. Will one of my great-great-grandchildren spend time researching my story? Well, what will they make of it? In this age of information overload, how much more will they be able to say about me? At least, providing it survives, they'll have an idea of what I look like from my photos, and of course they'll have all the old footage of how we live from TV, videos and films. This monologue is a plea for you to take note of your own family so that future generations can inherit their stories. And life is stranger than fiction. Thank you.